Hi, I'm Eduardo Lavaque and I have been a software engineer for 11 years and tomorrow is my birthday. So I thought I would just share some lessons that I've learned over the last 29 years and see where it takes us. I have written down a bunch of them. I figured I shouldn't think about them too deeply because if I think about them too deeply, perhaps it's not a lesson that I've actually learned. Maybe the ones that come right to the top of my head are the ones that are important. That might be totally wrong though. But anyway, on the way here I actually thought of a couple more, so I will read those off to you first because I don't have them written down before I forget them. First one is, exercise is important. For most of my life, the first 23 years of my life, I didn't exercise. I didn't really do sports. I didn't really work out. I didn't really lift heavy things or anything. I was just on the computer because I like computers. Yeah, that was kind of a mistake, and I would probably teach my children to be more physically active. Reason being, it's just you feel better, and you have like a natural outlet for energy. And of course, there's different body types. Some body types prefer to run, and others prefer to lift heavy things, and all sorts of things. Well, there's also the matter of taste of the person with that body. In my case, long endurance things don't really suit me, but carrying heavy things does. And I don't mean carrying the heaviest thing you can, but rather carrying moderate weight for extended periods of time. That seems to be what my body likes. So I do a lot of that with kettlebells and yeah, just trying to carry as many things as I can for a long duration of time. But anyway, exercise is important. Second point, which I didn't write down, the people you surround yourself with are actually important. And this isn't just because, well, you're surrounding yourself with them, so of course you must like them, but rather because whatever they like, you will come to like. Whatever they dislike, you will come to dislike. And of course you ask for advice from the people that you know and frequently are with. If it's people that have values that perhaps you don't consider ideal, you will be picking up their values and their advice will come from a place which you don't agree with. That actually burned me in this life. I spent 2 or 3 years in a, I'd say, toxic men's group, which the only reason I got out basically was because my wife was kind enough to show me that actually they're fucked up. They're not really right. They don't really give you the results you want. You don't really agree with them. And she's right. At the end of the day, I figured that out, hopefully on my own, but the reality is that she helped me a lot with that. And that's just a piece of advice I would like to give to you. Choose your friends wisely. And it might be the case that you have to lose friends. I mean, I was really good friends with a bunch of those guys, but our values just didn't align. So we went different ways. Okay, now to the ones that I actually wrote down. There's one in here that I wrote first, which I consider to be the most important, but I'll put it last. Another lesson I learned the hard way, and I guess this would be lesson number 3, is you are not owed anything. I was really arrogant. I had the idea that because I am a certain profession, I have a certain degree of software engineering skill, that I was owed a certain salary and a certain amount of respect and all of these things. But the fact of the matter is I hadn't earned it. I mean, it's cool to want a high salary, but you got to earn that salary. You got to produce at least that salary's amount, but more. Otherwise, what's the point of hiring you? If you're a net zero, what's the point of hiring you? And if you're net zero, you're really close to net minus. So it's better to be net positive by a large margin. And then you can also actually get raises and get hired in the kinds of roles you want. But yeah, because I was arrogant, I wasn't working hard. And that wasted a few years of my life, of my professional life, primarily. Yeah, don't do that. Be more humble. Realize that if you're getting paid a certain amount and you want to get paid more, you probably got to be way better than you are right now. Otherwise, you would be getting paid what you're getting paid. Assuming you don't have any self-deprecation issues or something where you think of yourself less than you are. If you're thinking of yourself high, you probably don't have this problem, and the actual problem is that you're not as good as you think you are. At least not for the economy. Okay? And of course, that doesn't mean anything about your value as a person, only your economic value. This is a lesson I learned very recently, I would say within the last couple of weeks. It's control what you can't and manage what, control what you can and manage what you cannot control. Of course, this might be a little bit of a stoic point, but primarily what you can control, control it. And anything else, don't worry about it. However, maybe you can manage it. You can know what the boundaries are and communicate with the other side about that and maybe work around it a little bit. In other words, control it a little bit, manage it a little bit. But you cannot necessarily control it. And worrying about it, stressing about it, will not do you any good. In fact, it will be quite stressful. So just focus on what you can control. And a funny thing about this, every time I hear this, nobody tells you what control actually is. I have a definition from a philosopher, which is control is made up of 3 parts, and when you can do all 3, you have good control. If you cannot do any of them, then you have no control at all. Or to that degree, you don't have control. The 3 parts are starting things, changing things, and stopping things, or people. If you can start a project, to that degree you're controlling the project. If you can, through time, change that project so that it continues, to that degree you can control that project. And if when you want you can stop that project, you can control that. Now, an addiction might be, for example, an inability to stop an action, a consumption. Then you're not really in control of it, right? Or on the flip side, you cannot control yourself and you have to start it. That would be the rebound, for example, right? So those, when you want good control, you just need to be able to do all 3 of them to the degree that is necessary. That's what it means to control something. And if you cannot do those things, because it's literally impossible for you, by which I mean it's not something you could realistically do. Like, I cannot control the weather, right? But I can manage it. I can find out what the weather is going to be and manage my activities around that. So what I can control, I can manage it around the thing I cannot control. Okay? The next point became clear to me recently, but I guess I knew it for longer than that, at least intuitively. It's writing and reading are important. So I've always been reading. I've been reading since I was a kid. Of course, I didn't read philosophy when I was a kid. I was reading comic books, but as I became older, I did read philosophy, and I read self-help books, and I read a lot online. And I don't mean skimming, I mean actually reading top to bottom. And I've watched as well a lot of videos, like 3-hour videos, just without pause, without getting distracted. It's just this idea of properly consuming things in sequential order over a long period of time with a high amount of focus. That would be reading, right? And it also trains you to load another worldview into your head, right? Now, apparently there's science to say that actually reading is incredibly important, and it changes your brain completely. It makes you more intelligent. It lets you think about things more systematically, etc., etc., etc. There is a theory that basically the only reason that the Age of Enlightenment came, meaning when we started figuring out a lot of science and a lot of technical advancements and a lot of philosophical and religious advancements, it was just because reading and writing became a thing. Now, reading is all good, it's consumption, but what about writing? Well, I think if you can write well, you can probably structure your thoughts very well. So it's probably worth getting good at that. And you're not going to get good at it if you have AI do it for you. I've already made a video about that. So it's worth just sitting down at least once a month and writing something, whatever it is. Over the long period, it will pay off. I've been told I write well. I'm not sure I can certainly say I write fast. I don't know if I write well, but it's only if I do write well, it's only because I have been writing for years, more than 10 years, 15 years maybe, 16 years. I have a blog, I've been writing on it. I've been writing on chats for a really long time, and I didn't write these 5-word messages that you keep blasting at the other side. I wrote whole paragraphs and sentences in Discord, which is perhaps a little bit out of character for my age, perhaps. But just write and read. It does improve your quality of life. Next up, clarity is important, which is relatively self-explanatory, I guess. But the idea is clarity of what you want to do, where you want to go, and how you're going to get there, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it. These are all actually really important things, and it's what stumps a lot of people a lot of the time. They think, okay, great, I need to, whatever, I want to be an astronaut. Well, how do I start? You see, they have enough clarity to know that they want to be an astronaut, but they don't have enough clarity to know how to get there. So the trick is actually to get that clarity, and getting that clarity is a skill. And it's not necessarily easy, especially if we're talking about life goals and this kind of thing. But how can I get there is on a more mechanical level. It's actually really simple. Figure out what the requirements are, figure out what needs to be done in order for those requirements to be fulfilled, and that gives you a bunch of steps, and each of those steps has its own, well, what is required in order to achieve this step, this and that. Okay, what is required in order to achieve those things, those requirements, this and that, and so on. I mean, it's actually quite a mechanical thing. It's just it's a lot of work sometimes, and you might end up with a list with 100 points that you have to do. I'm like, oh boy. But at least now you have clarity on what actually needs to be done, and you can just look at that list and pick something off of it and do it. It kind of biases you towards action, because you know what needs to be done. You just go through the list and pick something. And if you're doing it, it will achieve eventually what you're seeking out to achieve. Maybe it won't be the most efficient way to do it, but it will achieve it. So clarity is important. It's also not easy. It's simple. It's actually really simple, but it's not easy. Now, what do we mean by simple? It means it doesn't have a lot of parts or steps. It's a mechanical process, and it has just a couple steps, and you do them and you're there. But it's not easy, because doing those steps requires a lot of effort sometimes, or it might, and it requires really sitting down and doing it. And that, for most people, is not an easy thing to do in any case. Even for myself, I don't speak I'm not trying to speak lowly of others. I'm also speaking lowly of myself. It's really not easy to do that. Anyway, clarity is important. I hope that's clear. Connection is required. For the majority of my life, I didn't connect with others. Reasons, I don't know, might be trauma, might be habits, might be I just didn't think it necessary. It wasn't part of my education. Now that I'm 29, tomorrow, I do realize actually connection makes life a lot easier, a lot more enjoyable. And it makes giving up bad habits easier as well. Because a lot of giving up a bad habit is processing why you have that bad habit. I'm talking about addictions and this kind of thing. If you have any. I'm sure you do. Some. Most people are at least addicted to coffee. If not to their feed, or to porn, or to gossip, or drama online, or anything like that. What was the point? Connection, right? When you speak with others about these things, how they make you feel, why you're doing them, how they have processed similar things, that processing is extremely valuable, and it gets you to where you want to go. In this case, for example, with an addiction, which is off the addiction. It's also the flavor of life. I mean, why do we live life? It's not to have money. We have the money in order to hopefully get connection. That's a false assumption, but sometimes money does get you connections with certain people, but probably not the kind of connection you in your heart desire, which is a human-to-human connection. That connection, you just need to talk to people. You could literally go on the street and talk with someone, ask them some interesting questions, and there are interesting questions to ask, right? And you can just ask this of people, and people will answer sometimes. If you're just genuine about it, you can ask them, what's the hardest thing about your life? And they will tell you about it if you listen. If you listen. The moment you stop listening, they shut up. You should try it. It really opens up a lot of connection. Connection is extremely rare in today's world and extremely coveted. Everybody wants it. Why? Because it's a human requirement for existence. You cannot exist as a human alone. I mean, sure you can, but you're not going to be happy to the same degree that other people are with connection. It's a very small existence. Okay? Okay. I wrote here breadth and depth. And the point I want to make is just, it is worth having a breadth of knowledge and fields that you're familiar with and skills. But you just need to pick some where you're deep. And that sets a base for what you can actually achieve. In software engineering, for me, that means I'm a generalist. I can do almost anything. Really, I can. Just give me some time, perhaps. I need to learn something new, but the fact that I can just learn it, that in itself is a skill. But I'm a generalist. I don't specialize particularly in very many things. Instead, I take a deep viewpoint and I drill down little by little on all of those points. Rather than, here's my one vertical and I go super deep on it. It's more valuable to have a breadth to approach this one vertical with than it is to have this one vertical. Now, where it becomes really valuable is if you have a breadth of knowledge up to a certain degree, not just surface level, but a little bit deeper, let's say 2 levels in, and then 2 or 3 of those you go really deep, let's say 10 levels deep. Now you have something to work with and approach the field with that other people who are specialized don't have. It's funny to me when in a job post for front end, they ask you to please know SQL. That those things are completely unrelated. But what they're actually saying is, hey, please be a little bit of a back-end developer as well. Don't just know front-end technologies, I need you to also know about databases, right? But every time I read a front-end position, I even applied for a front-end position. I'm a full-stack developer, right? I applied for a front-end position. During the interview, they asked me, are you familiar with SQL? Yeah, it's in my CV. I've been working with it for 11 years. That's no insult to them. It's just, who doesn't know SQL is what I was thinking. I mean, if you want to do anything, you need to know it. And things are moving more towards generalism. You need to know a lot of things, and some of them very deeply. But you need to know a lot of things. This goes back to reading, by the way. If you read a lot of books on a lot of subjects, you will know a shit ton of things. And that's valuable, not just professionally, but also as a person. It's really interesting to speak with somebody that knows a lot of things. And it gives you a different perspective on life that you can apply on your own life. Okay. Spirituality is required. Humans are spiritual. There's no working around that. The less spiritual we are, the more unhappy we are. You can study that. I mean, religious people are happier. Spiritual people are happier even if they're not religious. Materialistic people are sad. Atheist people are sad. Now that might just be because they don't have anything to look forward to after life. They have no hope, in other words. I also made another video about that. Or it's just because it's part of the human experience and always has been, up until recently when some people, some philosophers convinced leaders that that wasn't the case, and those leaders then promoted that as the worldview. I mean, in very high up medical positions for psychology and this kind of thing, these people are not even spiritual. How can you be a psychologist dealing with the human psyche and not be spiritual or religious? The human psyche is spiritual and is religious. Of course, that might ruffle some feathers because those people themselves would disagree, otherwise they themselves would be. But anyway, I wrote on the front with marker and on the back with a pen, so sometimes it's really hard. Okay, how the hell did I read that? Okay, love has many faces. Somehow that's just what I wrote down to say there is a lesson in Christianity and the God and the love that Jesus showed to others. Others have called it greatness. Another philosopher has called it greatness. To continue loving your fellow human, your brother, your sister, despite all invitations to do otherwise. That is greatness. By that definition, Jesus was really great. But what it means is you don't fall into hate. You don't fall into a downward spiral. You stay on your upward spiral. You stay with your positive energies. And that positive energy will affect the rest of the world. I mean, look at how Jesus affected the rest of the world. Sure, okay, some argue he is God. Then of course he affected the rest of the world like that. But if he isn't God, that dude was like seriously something. He went through some shit. And despite that, he loved. Love has many faces. I mean, practically that means that people love differently. Some people love with words and gifts, and other people love with action. In reality, I think most people love with all of them to varying degrees. And most people like all of them to varying degrees. Gifts, okay, I appreciate them, but I'm not the kind of person to give a gift. Except when I see something and I think, this person would love this, and I buy that gift and I give it to them. And in that moment, I was the ultimate gift giver, right? Because I bought something specifically that that person, I'm sure, needed and wanted. Versus, I'm just going to give flowers all the time. But I'm sure people that give flowers all the time think it's really good. And I don't depreciate that, misappreciate that. I don't know what would be the opposite of appreciate. Deprecate? Nah. Okay, silence is required. I do mean silence in the sense of no sound, no volume, like coming to a forest like this, but I also do mean silence of mind. Taking some time to just chill is important. I think I'm hearing a woodpecker. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for a human to make a noise where they're hitting wood like that. Silence is required. Sitting down with yourself, and only yourself, and maybe a notebook, and thinking, processing. What do I want to do with life? What do I want to teach my children? What do I think about my wife? What does she think about me? And this brings up questions that you can then talk about with people, but it also lets you organize your thoughts in a way that makes it much easier for you to know who you are, how you are, and it makes it much easier to express it to others. It's rather important, and I highly suggest that anybody that is terminally online to disconnect, and as the meme goes, go and touch some grass. I mean, you can just lay down on the grass for 2 hours, do nothing. Take a nap if you need to, that's fine. In fact, most of the time, if you're in silence, you'll find yourself taking a nap. Your body actually needed that, you just didn't know it. Because it's too noisy, like in your head. Everybody is their own. What that means is that, sorry, people are different, and you're not going to make people be the same as you or how you want them to be. And the moment you realize that, and you let go of that, you can appreciate people for who they really are, and they will appreciate that. Because not a lot of people really appreciate them. And that's a fact. How many people do you yourself really feel like they know you and they appreciate you for who you are? And they don't try to change you. In any case, of course, they try to help you, they give you advice, they tell you what they think, but they're not trying to force a change on you. They're not saying, oh, you shouldn't smoke, come on, man. They just say, hey, man, I mean, have you thought about not smoking? And if you say, yeah, I've thought about it, but it's fine. Then they say, okay. And if they don't like that, they just disconnect, or they leave, or they connect less frequently. But they don't try to change you and force you. I'm sure everybody's been in a relationship where you're being manipulated or they're trying to force you to do something, whether you know it or not, or whether they know it or not. That's not cool. Let people be. Now, that being said, don't allow people to do evil things. It's, as a good person, which most people are, it is your duty to not allow that. And in my opinion, at any personal cost. That would be a hero, somebody that at any given personal cost, they stop evil. There's the famous picture of a guy in a Nazi parade, and he's not doing the Nazi salute. Upon very deep research, apparently, you can find that that dude was not against Nazis. He just didn't want to do the salute because that would be putting somebody above Jesus. You would be worshiping somebody that isn't God. And on that principle, he didn't do it. So that guy had balls in that environment to say, no, there's a principle, and I think God is the only one that is above everybody else. I'm not going to demonstrate that I think anything else about that. That guy had his principles, right? But he wasn't standing up against evil in that case, in a sense. He wasn't standing up against Nazis. He was standing up against the evil concept of saying that something is above God. Anyway, it's just a less romantic story because the other story is that he had a Jewish wife or whatever, and so on. Maybe that's a non sequitur and not actually relevant at all to the whole video. But The only point I'm trying to make is let people be, but stand up against evil. And if you can do that, you're a great person. By the way, don't hate evil people. That's also another point. Okay, now the largest lesson that I've learned, and unfortunately I think I can only learn it with time. I wish I knew it earlier, then I'd be in much different places now. Is the concept of there's not enough time, and yet there is enough time. And it's shown in the quote attributed to Bill Gates, but I'm sure somebody else came up with it first. Everybody overestimates what they can do in a month, but everybody underestimates what they can do in 1 year. If you do frequently and regularly a particular activity, you will get better at it. And over time, that will be valuable. You don't need to go to the gym 4 times a week, 2 hours every time for whatever. You don't need to do that. If you get down and learn how to do a push-up, and you do a push-up 5, 10, 20 push-ups a day, your physique will change. You will look different. Your stature will be different. Your strength will be different. Your self-confidence will be different. It's all in these little increments. This universe really works on small increments. There's rarely, if ever, any jumps like that. It all worked on little increments. Even science, the jumps of science that have defined our modern era, they were built over decades. And as some scientist dude once said, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. The only reason he could discover what he discovered is because other people already discovered a lot of other things before him. And he just had to connect one more dot. Goes back to what I said about writing. Just write frequently. You will get better. At the beginning, okay, you're just struggling to write. But at some point you get fast enough at writing that you can start thinking about, well, how can I write it better? Of course, in order to do that, you need to read a lot, hopefully, so that you have an idea of what better might look like. You know, I don't like to interrupt people who are on their walks and this kind of thing. And it's less about being embarrassed and more about, like, I don't want to bother them. So when somebody starts walking by, I just shut up. I wonder if the microphone can even pick this up. Okay. There's other things like language. I've been living in Switzerland for 10 years almost. If I had just put a little bit of time every day, a little bit of interest every day, every week, every month on German, I would be fluent by now. Instead, I only started doing that in the last, half a year, 1 year. And I'm having to do it more, how do you say that? Consciously, with more effort, instead of just enjoying it along the way. I've had an interest in making video games for 10 years. If I had just actually done that a little bit every week, I'd probably have multiple games by now, and I have some skills I can sell. Instead, I actually have to make time on it, even though I don't really have a lot of time now. It's all just priorities at the end of the day. Now this video is actually long enough that even though it's been quiet for like half an hour, people are starting to walk through. And I don't even know why they're starting to walk through here. Maybe they went on a really long hike. They can't even hear me. Apparently the forest is really effective at making things quiet. Oh, unfortunate that my flow was broken there. The only point is, don't be rushed. Don't be relaxed, but don't be rushed. Instead, be calm. And continue working on it. And it will mean something eventually. I know people that, due to all the internet hype and their own lack of insight into this subject, despite my best advice, they're so rushed to become a millionaire within the next couple of years. It's like, bro, old money, which is, it's quote unquote old money, but it's still going. So it's still modern money. Got rich on principles, on experience, on doing things the right way and actually figuring out the universe. They didn't get rich with a Bitcoin. What happened to all those Bitcoin boys? They're all fucking broke now. They didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know any principles. They didn't have the discipline you need to learn along the way, etc. So I highly encourage you to just take a long-term viewpoint on it and just do it on a long-term basis. I want to make video games. I really do. I mean, no matter how many times I try to forget about it, I still want to make video games. So I guess I'll just make a video game at some point. And I mean, well, I guess I'll just calmly learn about trigonometry, calmly learn about low-level programming with memory-managed languages. Because there is a certain standard of game I want to make. And it requiring 2 GB of RAM is not part of that standard. That's just not part of the aesthetic that I want to have for my game. That was the first lesson I wrote down, which means it's the most important. And it's the one that I really, really, really hope to teach my children. The earlier you start and you keep going at it, the more benefits you will reap later on. So start early. I mean, if that means investment for you, great. Everybody tries to teach people this about investment. And unfortunately, the thing about investment is you keep losing things, money, but you don't see the outcome until way later. With skills and this kind of thing, it's a bit quicker because also it's fun while you are doing it. Okay, maybe it's not fun to struggle, but it is fun to struggle. That's part of the experience of human life. In order to do this, though, you will probably have to drop a few habits, like scrolling, like watching a lot of YouTube videos, etc. Because in reality, there isn't a lot of time. There's only a lot of time when you put it all together over a long period of time. On any given day, there isn't a lot of time. So you actually have to economize on that. Okay. I hope this video was helpful. Sorry it's a bit rambly and not as one point about as all the other videos. But I just, whatever, it's my 29th birthday. I get to do whatever I want tomorrow. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Stick around if you like my personality or whatever. Peace.